Well, hello everyone. I'm Mansoor Javidan. I'm a professor at the Thunderbird School of Global Management at Arizona State University. And thank you very much for taking this course, Communicating in a Global Environment. I hope that you are enjoying the topics and the course so far. We have a number of live sessions throughout this course to give me a chance to give you some feedback and also answer your questions and be helpful in any way that that we can. So this is the first in our series of live sessions. I'm very happy to know that we have over 1,000 participants in this course. That shows there's a lot of interest. I'm also very happy to see that we have participants from pretty much all over the world, tens of countries, all over the map, and that's really fantastic. I hope that you have been able to form your groups of two and have been able to collaborate so far, because a big part of this course is not just my slides or my videos or any readings. A big part of our course is how you apply what you're learning in the course right off the bat. And that's really the purpose of asking you to find someone from another part of the world and collaborate with them. So I hope you have done it, and I hope you're enjoying the experience. It doesn't always mean it's easy, and there may be technological issues. I'm sure there are time difference issues, but that is the reality of global business. And one of the features of this course is that it's very realistic and very practical. So I hope you're enjoying that. And again, if you have any questions or concerns, make sure that you send them to us, and we'll try to address or answer your questions in the best way that we can. Now, prior to the session, we received a few questions, and I will try to answer those first. But for those of you who are attending the sessions right now, if you have any further questions, just please go ahead and send it to us, and I'll try to answer them. The first question that that I'd like to discuss is while dealing with people from different cultures for business operations, often we face the language barrier and how to tackle this. How best do we convey messages when there is a language barrier? This is a really very practical question. This is what happens many, many times when you're working with people from different parts of the world. People speak different languages, and it's not always easy to make it work. So here are a number of ways that organizations and individual executives that I work with have tried to address that. When we talk about communication, it's really two sides to it. There is a face-to-face communication, either verbal or written, and then there is virtual communication through email or Skype or other things. So I'll try to address this question in the context of the different ways of methods of communication that exist. So let's start with face-to-face communication. In face-to-face communications, when people who are trying to work together happen to be from two different parts of the world and speak two different languages, the best way to help out is to have a person who can translate back and forth. So you really need someone who can speak both of the languages to be in the meeting and make sure that both sides understand each other. So that slows things down. I understand that. And that also adds to costs of doing business or whatever it is that you are doing. But there is no better alternative. I mean, when you are in a meeting with someone who speaks a different language, you really need to make sure that you have expertise along with you in the other language. Sometimes, for example, if you look at how government officials deal with that, because this is really serious business for them, they actually have, each side brings their own translator because they want to make sure that this is a person who they can trust. So that's how it works. And the two people, the officials, talk to each other, but it's really translators who are sitting behind them and speaking to them in their own language, translating things as they happen. The same is in business. That's what it takes. Now, in written presentations or in documents, or you have a PowerPoint presentation to make, you again need expertise to help you out and make sure that whatever message you are trying to communicate is translated properly and is understood properly. So in my experience, something that has worked really nicely in email and in PowerPoint slides and also in official documents is that all of them are provided in both languages. So if you're sending an email to someone, you have it translated into their language on your side and make sure that the translation is appropriate. And then you email both your language message plus the translated message. Or if you're making PowerPoint presentations virtually or face-to-face, again, you have both languages on the slides. And definitely, if there's a contract or an agreement, it has to be in both languages. So as you can see, it slows the process down. It creates natural barriers in communication, but it is better than the alternative, which is total lack of understanding. So that's how it works. And there are many experts in different countries who are interpreters, and they can provide that service. But you need to make sure in finding an interpreter that the interpreter is not just fluent in the other language, but the interpreter has to be able to understand the concepts that you are talking about. If it's a technical concept, the interpreter has to understand what the message is. If it's a political message, the interpreter has to be able to understand. So it's not just language, it's language in the context of the field or discipline or area of expertise that you are discussing with someone else. So those are the nuances that you have to be careful with. All right, I'm going to move on now to the second question. What are the most important issues in global communication? It's very simple: misunderstanding. The most important issue in global communication is two sides trying to communicate with each other, sending messages that are received and interpreted differently from the way that the sender intended. So that issue of people misreading, misinterpreting the message that's being sent is the biggest issue. And that level of miscommunication then causes misunderstanding. It also causes lack of trust, and it starts jeopardizing any kind of a relationship that you may want to build. And the risks are higher as you move from face-to-face to virtual. Because at least in face-to-face, you have opportunity for feedback, you have opportunity to observe the other person, continue the conversation in bits and pieces to make sure that the message is understood. But in email or virtual communication, that becomes cumbersome. So that's the biggest risk. And it's really nobody's fault. No one wants to create misunderstanding when they're dealing with people from other parts of the world. As you now know, it's the lenses that exist and the way that people interpret other people's messages, but using their own cultural lens. And that's where the problem starts. There is a question that I'm not sure I understand. What is the major and minor link in global communication? I actually, here's an example of miscommunication. I don't understand what that question means. And since it's an email, I have no opportunity to ask the questionnaire, what exactly did you mean by that? See, we're going through a real life situation right now. So I'm going to move on. How someone from Africa will get a connection with someone in Europe or in another part of the world? Now, this is a very good question, and I do understand the question. So let's start with this course. In this course, right now, we have over 1,000 participants. We have people from all over the world, including Europe, the Middle East, Africa, North America, South America. So you can use this existing virtual network that's involved in this course as a starting point. You can send an email, you can put a note on a discussion board, telling people, hey, I'd like to get in touch with people who happen to be living and working in Europe or North America or any part of the world. It helps, it increases your probability of success if you provide some information about yourself. Who are you? What do you do? What's your area of expertise? What is your area of interest? So show some information about yourself to so that the potential individuals in other parts of the world who see your message will decide, oh, this is an interesting person. We have something in common. Let's get in touch. Or this person knows something that I'm curious about and I want to get in touch. So point one, use this course. Step number two, there are many tools in social media that are designed to provide that opportunity. LinkedIn is a very powerful way of connecting with people who are professionals, so the LinkedIn connections are not really about personal connections or social connections. They're about business-related connections. So again, if your interest is to get in touch with professionals, business people, government officials, anyone, with a professional curiosity, then you can use the LinkedIn exactly the way that you use this course that I described. Now, Facebook, of course, is the social side. There are other social media opportunities similar to these. Bottom line is, the answer to your question is use technology and use the types of groups that have potential commonality with you. That's why I started with this course. Your commonality with other people in this course is you have common interest in cross-cultural communication. That's a great starting point. You already have something in common. So that would be my answer to that question. The next question is, what is the cultural-based non-governmental organization that promotes cultural enterprise and learning? You know, the United Nations has some really interesting groups like UNESCO that are designed to promote cultural connections, relationships. For a while, the United Nations started an initiative to improve relationships among the youth of different countries, to avoid clash of civilizations. I'm not exactly up to date on that organization and whether or not it is still functioning. I haven't heard from them and about them for several years. But my point is, start with the United Nations website. There are many entities inside the United Nations that are tasked with that initiative. Another possibility is for you to think about, these aren't exactly non-government organizations, but they are entities of specific governments that are designed to improve cultural understanding. For example, the British Council has a long history of trying to promote relationships between the British culture and people from different parts of the world. So, and governments, the government of France, the Canadian government, the US government has an entity called Voice of America. But then when you look at, or when you approach these entities on the internet, you need to pay attention to what their mandates are, because some of them have political mandates, some of them have cultural mandates, but they do exist, and many governments have policies and entities like that. So if there is a particular part of the world that you are interested in connecting to culturally, look through the government's website, plus the United Nations. Let's go to the next question. What types of culture can create a link between West African storytelling, dance, music for university students from Africa to the US and Europe, as well as local students? Again, this question is a little vague to me. I don't exactly understand what is the question. If the question is, how can a West African group publicize its storytelling, dance, music, capabilities and history and heritage to the rest of the world, the best option that I can think of is YouTube. There are many ways that the African culture, or any country's culture, can be promoted, described on YouTube. It really goes back to technology and how you use it to communicate your message about the culture of the country. Community-focused institutions in the building and management of cultural camps. Okay. So I think what is a little confusing to me is that the person who is asking this question is actually using the word culture to mean two things. One is the culture of the country, and the other is the art and music of the country. So if the question is, how can this person or institutions of this person's country provide cultural camps, that's really not the point of this course, and I'm no expert in that subject. So our focus is on culture of countries, not culture as a collection of arts. Okay, so that covers the questions that I have. Laura, you have another question for us?
We do, and this is just posted. So what are the important aspects of nonverbal communication?
Oh, that's an excellent question. So let me start with a few comments. To start with, cultures of the world actually use nonverbal communication in different ways. Some cultures, like Italy, people in Italy, when they communicate, the whole body communicates. There's a lot of physical movement and arms and hands and facial expressions, and so the Italian communication style uses all kinds of nonverbal communication as a natural part of how they communicate. In some cultures, such as the Japanese culture, you don't see a lot of very visible nonverbal communication. They tend to be much more quiet when they communicate. So not a lot of body movement or facial expressions. So point one is that nonverbal communication is used heavily in some cultures and very seldom or little in other cultures. Now, let's get into some specifics of nonverbal communication. Let's think about silence. Silence is an example of nonverbal communication. Now, in the Japanese culture, silence is a very prevalent thing. So it's quite possible that people in a meeting, when they're discussing things, everybody becomes quiet. It doesn't mean they're asleep. It means they are now reflecting. And everybody understands that. So the body language of silence has a very specific meaning in the Japanese culture. It means reflection. It means thinking about what is being discussed. So it's a show of engagement. Now, in the American culture, if you have a room with 5 Americans sitting in a room and everybody's quiet, everybody becomes very uncomfortable. They don't know what to do with it. Because in the American style of communication, assertive communication and constant communication is very important. So silence is confusing, and at best is interpreted as, oh, if I'm saying something and the other people are quiet, that means everybody agrees with what I say. And that actually causes a number of miscommunication issues between Americans and some Asian cultures, because as I mentioned earlier, silence in Asian cultures does not necessarily mean they agree with anything. It just means they are engaged in the conversation. Another example of nonverbal expressions is smile. So in some cultures, smiling in the middle of conversation is strange, especially when you're dealing with strangers. People tend to be very formal and structured, and they don't know what it means when a stranger who is in a meeting with them starts smiling at them, especially in a business situation. Now, in some other cultures, like the Canadian culture or the American culture, it's quite natural for people to smile. They see it as a natural way of showing interest and participating in the discussion. So point two is different cultures use different types of nonverbal communication. The third point I want to make is emotions. To what extent people show emotions as part of communication. In a culture like the German culture or Japanese culture, you don't see a lot of emotions in conversations. In Spanish culture or in Italian culture, you can see a lot of emotions in the communication. So again, to summarize, the extent to which countries use nonverbal communication in their communication is different, and the type of nonverbal communication that they use is also different. All right. Anything else, Laura?
I believe that is all the questions we have at this time.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you very much again for joining us. Those of you who have joined us, thank you to those of you who will be watching this video. I hope you will find these comments helpful, and keep your questions coming. We'd love to try to answer them as best we can. Thank you. Bye-bye.